Hi, welcome to The Anesthetist. Where are you listening from tonight? Maybe it's late. Maybe the world around you is already quiet. Wherever you are, this is your space to slow down, to think, and to wonder. Tonight, we're imagining a world without the moon. No silver glow above us, no tides to stir the oceans, no steady hand on Earth's tilt. We'll drift through the questions together. What would change, what would vanish, and what it means for us that the moon is here at all. So get comfortable, let the day fall away, and let's begin. Chapter 1, A World Without a Companion. When you look up at the night sky, there is always comfort in knowing the moon is there. Sometimes it is a thin sliver, almost vanishing, and sometimes it is whole and bright, glowing with a calmness that feels timeless. It has been there for every human before us, a companion that never strays too far. But imagine, just for a moment, if the moon was not there at all. Imagine stepping outside at night and finding the sky stripped bare. The stars remain, scattered and sharp, but the moon is gone. The night feels deeper, darker, and strangely hollow. The earth feels lonelier without it. The moon did not appear by chance. Billions of years ago, Earth was young, still forming, still molten and restless. A massive object, roughly the size of Mars, struck it with a force beyond imagination. The collision tore Earth apart, flinging molten rock into orbit, a ring of debris circling around the wounded planet. Over millions of years, that debris came together, cooling and solidifying, until it formed the sphere we now call the moon. Its beginning was violent, but its role ever since has been quiet and steady. Without that collision, Earth would be spinning through space without this companion. And if the moon had never formed, our planet would be something entirely different. The first thing we would notice is the darkness. A full moon is nearly 500,000 times brighter than the brightest star. It casts shadows. It glows across oceans. It lights paths for travelers and hunters. Without it, the night would be ink black. For early humans, that difference would have been profound. Fire would have been the only source of light after sunset. Movement at night would be far more dangerous. Hunters would find it harder to stalk, and prey would find it harder to escape. Human culture itself might have developed differently. The moon gave us a way to measure time, a cycle to watch and follow. Months, calendars, stories, rituals, all tied to its waxing and waning. Without it, those cultural anchors would never have existed. Civilizations may have developed slower or in entirely different ways, shaped by a sky that offered fewer patterns to follow. But it is not only about light. The moon's gravity reaches across space and touches Earth every moment. It pulls on the oceans, raising tides that move in and out each day. If the moon were gone, the tides would shrink dramatically. The sun does create tides, but they are weaker, far less dramatic than the pull of the moon. Without it, the coastlines of Earth would be quieter. The daily rhythm of high and low water would fade, replaced by small, gentle shifts that might pass unnoticed. Yet tides are not just scenery. They are engines of life. They churn the oceans, mixing nutrients from the deep with waters at the surface. They feed plankton, the foundation of the food chain. They shape estuaries, mangroves, and coral reefs. Without strong tides, those ecosystems would weaken or collapse. Life along the shore would disappear, and with it countless species that depend on the constant rise and fall of the sea. There is more. The moon slows Earth down. When Earth first formed, it spun fast. A single day was no more than 6 hours. The sun would have risen and set 4 times in what we now call one day. Over billions of years, the moon's pull has acted like a brake, dragging against Earth's spin, stretching our days longer and longer until they reached the 24 hours we live by today. Without the moon, Earth would still be spinning fast. Our days might last only 6 to 8 hours. Imagine living under a sky where sunrise and sunset pass in a rush. where daylight lasts only a few hours before night falls again. Winds would be stronger, storms more violent, weather less forgiving. Life might still exist under those conditions, but it would be forced to adapt to rhythms far more chaotic than the ones we know. Our own sense of time, our ability to grow crops, our patterns of sleep and work, none of it would be the same. And then there is Earth's tilt. Right now, our planet leans at about 23.5 degrees. That tilt gives us seasons. It gives us summers and winters, springs and autumns. But more than that, it makes our climate stable over long stretches of time. The moon acts as a stabilizer. It holds Earth steady, preventing the axis from wobbling too far. Without it, Earth's tilt would drift chaotically. Sometimes it might sit almost upright, giving us no seasons at all. Other times it might lean nearly sideways, plunging one pole into decades of sunlight, while the other remains locked in darkness. Imagine Antarctica bathed in endless summer, its ice caps collapsing into the sea. Then centuries later, frozen in endless winter. The climate would swing violently. Life would struggle to adapt. Agriculture, which depends on stable seasons, might not even be possible. Civilizations, if they formed, would face a world that shifted constantly beneath them. Life on Earth has been shaped by the moon in countless small ways. Corals release their eggs during the full moon. Sea turtles crawl onto beaches and find the ocean guided by its glow. Wolves howl under it. Owls hunt with it. Prey hides in its shadows. Without the moon, those patterns would vanish. Evolution itself might have taken a different path. The diversity of life we see now could be thinner, slower, less varied. Perhaps complex life would still have emerged, but perhaps not. We cannot know for certain, but we can see the fingerprints of the moon across ecosystems everywhere. And then there is the human imagination. The moon is not just a light in the sky. It has been a mirror for our thoughts. Myths of gods and spirits, stories of love and longing, poems written across centuries, all of them tied to the moon. It is embedded in our languages and our rituals. Farmers planted by its cycles. Festivals were timed to its phases. Lovers walked beneath it. Artists painted it. Without the moon, our cultures would have been poorer, our stories emptier. The sky would have been missing one of its great symbols, and with it much of the inspiration that shaped human history. Earth without the moon is not just Earth in darkness. It is Earth spinning faster, wobbling unpredictably. Its seas quieter, its life altered, its culture diminished. The moon is not simply decoration. It is a partner in the balance of our planet. It slows our time, shapes our oceans, steadies our tilt, and lights our nights. Take it away, and Earth becomes something far more hostile, far less stable, and far darker. It becomes a place where perhaps we would not exist at all. When we look up at the moon, it is easy to see it as ordinary, because it has always been there. But the truth is that its presence is extraordinary. It is the silent hand holding Earth steady. It is the reason our planet has seasons that support life, days that are long enough to grow and rest, oceans that breathe in rhythm, and nights that are more than just darkness. The moon is not a passenger, it is a guardian. Without it, Earth would be a stranger to us, alien, unstable, and maybe even lifeless. And so, as we look up and see it glowing, we are reminded that this companion in the sky is part of what makes Earth home. Chapter 2, The Silent Ocean. Stand for a moment at the edge of the sea in your imagination. The air is heavy with salt, the sand cool beneath your feet, and the horizon stretches endlessly before you. You hear it before you see it. The steady rhythm of water drawing back, then returning with force, again and again. It is like the breathing of the earth itself. That rhythm is not chance. It is not just wind pushing water or waves striking sand. It is the pull of the moon, reaching across 250,000 miles, tugging the ocean back and forth in a dance, as old as the planet. Without the moon, that sound would almost vanish. The tides would shrink to whispers, the oceans would move less, and their life would change forever. It is hard to overstate how deeply tides shape the world. They are more than waves. They are engines. When the sea rises and falls, it stirs layers of water, dragging nutrients from the dark depths up toward the surface. That upward motion feeds plankton, the invisible drifters that form the foundation of the food chain. Plankton feed fish, fish feed bigger fish, and so the chain climbs, ending with whales, seabirds, and humans who cast nets into the water. Without the moon, this constant pump would weaken, nutrients would sink, trapped below. The surface would starve. The ocean would become quieter, less fertile, less alive. Just imagine coral reefs in this moonless world. These underwater cities are alive because tides carry food across them. Polyps, the small architects of coral, extend their tentacles into moving currents, catching plankton drifting by. Without tides, fewer nutrients reach them. The reefs weaken, fish leave. The brilliant colors fade. Whole ecosystems unravel, and with them, the abundance they support. Estuaries and mangroves, too, depend on tides. In these places where rivers meet the sea, tides flush food and oxygen into nurseries of young fish and shellfish. The retreating tide creates feeding grounds for crabs and shorebirds. Without the moon, these areas would lose their rhythm. The young would starve. Birds would search for food that never comes. The choreography of life along the shore would falter. It is easy to forget that humans are also part of this story. For as long as people have lived by the water, they have watched the tides. Fishermen learned when to set their nets and when to bring their boats back. Farmers along coasts learned to trust the rhythm of the water. Sailors charted their journeys not only by the stars, but by the swelling and retreating of the ocean. Entire cultures told time by the tides, their days and nights tied to the moon as much as to the sun. Remove the moon, and these patterns of survival would collapse. The sea would still move, but less weaker, more confusing. A world without strong tides is a world harder to live with, harder to understand, harder to navigate. Now think about what happens inside the ocean itself. Water must move for oxygen to spread. Tides help churn the seas, mixing oxygen into layers that would otherwise suffocate. In a still ocean, deep water stagnates. It becomes heavy, lifeless, even toxic. Fish cannot breathe, plankton cannot thrive, and ecosystems collapse from the bottom up. It would not happen instantly. It would happen slowly, almost invisibly, over centuries and millennia. But eventually, the seas would become poorer. They would lose the richness that makes Earth such a rare and vibrant world. Stand again on that shoreline. Listen, the sound of the waves we know today is not just wind striking water. Much of it comes from tides amplifying the ocean's voice, adding weight and rhythm. Without tides, the coast would still have waves, but their heartbeat would be weaker. Storms would still rage, of course. Hurricanes and cyclones would still smash against land. But the everyday pulse of the sea, the ordinary rise and fall that all life trusts, would fade into silence. Imagine walking a beach where the sea barely moves, a vast sheet of water lapping gently at the sand, but never pulling away, never rushing back. The ocean would seem more like a giant mirror reflecting the sky than a restless living force. Some scientists believe that without tides, life itself might never have begun. Tidal pools, those shallow pockets of water left behind when the ocean recedes, may have been the very places where the chemistry of life first took hold. Molecules concentrated there, bumping against each other in cycles of wet and dry, until eventually they formed the building blocks of biology. Without tides, those pools might never have existed in the same way. Life could have struggled to start at all. Or perhaps it would have started differently, slower, later, in ways we cannot imagine. And think of how this would change us. We often forget that tides are part of our imagination, as much as they are part of our planet. They gave us metaphors and stories. They taught us about rhythm, cycles, and change. Ancient cultures spoke of the moon pulling the seas, of gods and spirits walking with the tide. Poets wrote of love like the tide, always returning. Myths were born in the rise and fall of water. Without it, our stories would have been different, perhaps quieter, perhaps emptier, shaped by a sea that never seemed alive. In this moonless world, Earth would still have oceans. They would still cover most of the planet, still glitter in the sunlight, still crash during storms. But the ordinary daily rhythm would be gone. The coastlines would be emptier, the reefs quieter, the estuaries silent. The sea would not breathe the way it does now. It would be vast but shallow in its life. It would be heavy, but strangely still. The earth itself would feel less alive. It is strange to think that something so far away, a pale rock circling in the night sky, could control something as immense as the ocean. Yet that is what the moon does, every day, every night, without pause. Its pull is invisible, but its effects are everywhere. In the sound of the surf, in the food we eat, in the air we breathe, in the very possibility of life on this planet. Without it, the oceans would be quieter, and without living oceans, Earth would not be the Earth we know. So when you hear the sea, remember what you are listening to. You are hearing gravity stretched across space. You are hearing the rhythm of a partnership older than life itself. You are hearing the moon pulling at the water, stirring the world, giving Earth its voice. Remove it, and the silence would be overwhelming. The ocean without the moon would not be the same ocean at all. Chapter 3. The Tilted Earth. If you could drift far into space and look back at our planet, you would see that Earth does not spin like a perfectly upright top. Instead, it leans, tilted a little over 23 degrees on its axis. That small angle is the reason we have seasons, the reason snow falls in winter and flowers bloom in spring, the reason deserts bake under the summer sun and leaves turn in autumn. This tilt seems simple, almost ordinary, but it is one of the most important features of our planet, and it has been kept steady against the chaos of the solar system by the quiet presence of the moon. Without the moon, this tilt would not stay still. The pull of the sun, the gravitational nudges of other planets, even the slow push of Earth's own molten core would make the axis wander. Scientists have run models of a moonless Earth, and the results are striking. The tilt would drift chaotically, swinging between extremes. Sometimes the planet might stand nearly upright, with almost no tilt at all. In such times there would be no seasons, only eternal zones of heat near the equator and endless cold at the poles. Then, in another epoch, the tilt might swing far to the side, 40 degrees, 50 degrees, perhaps even more than 80. Imagine one pole turned toward the sun, basking in daylight that lasts for years, while the opposite pole lies in deep shadow, frozen under an endless night. This would not be a small shift. It would be a rewriting of climate, geography, and life itself. Think about what no tilt would mean. A world without seasons sounds gentle at first. No harsh winters, no scorching summers, but the truth is harsher. Crops rely on seasonal change to grow. Rains often follow shifting winds caused by the tilt. Without it, weather patterns would lock in place. The equator would roast under constant overhead sunlight, dry and lifeless. The poles would freeze permanently, heavy with ice. Between them would be narrow bands of tolerable climate, fragile strips where life might cling, but far less varied than the vibrant ecosystems we know. And then imagine the opposite extreme, a world tipped almost sideways. For half the year, one hemisphere would face the sun directly, bathing in relentless daylight. Temperatures would soar, ice caps would melt, oceans would rise and flood coastlines. For the other half of the year, that same hemisphere would face away, sinking into endless night, the land freezing solid, seas locked in ice. Civilizations, if they could ever form, would be shattered by these violent swings. Crops would fail, food would vanish, and people would be forced to migrate constantly, chasing survivable zones as the tilt changed. The Earth would be a world of chaos, unstable and unpredictable, never allowing more than temporary stability. These tilts would not shift gently. They would happen over thousands, sometimes millions of years, long for an individual human life, but short in geological time. For forests and oceans, for entire species, this wobbling would mean constant collapse and renewal. Ice sheets would advance and retreat in unpredictable cycles. Deserts would appear where there had once been grassland. Jungles would die back, then regrow in other places. The history of life would be one of endless upheaval, never given the chance to settle and flourish, as it has on our moon-stabilized Earth. The moon acts as a counterweight. Its gravity tugs at Earth's equatorial bulge, keeping the axis steady, allowing only a slow, gentle wobble of about 2 degrees over tens of thousands of years. That small variation gives us shifts like ice ages, but nothing more extreme. It is this steadiness that has made Earth's climate stable enough for agriculture, for migration, for human civilization to develop. Without the moon, the axis would wander like a spinning top, about to fall, and Earth's climate would be too unstable for our story to unfold as it has. Picture ancient humans watching the sky. They tracked the stars. They followed the sun. They planted by the moon. All of it depended on cycles that repeated predictably. In a world where Earth's tilt wandered wildly, those patterns would collapse. The sky would no longer be a reliable calendar. One generation might grow up under mild seasons, while the next lived through endless winters. Stories would describe a world that could never be trusted, and survival would mean constant adaptation. Would complex societies ever have risen in such conditions? Or would humanity have remained scattered, always moving, never able to stay in one place long enough to build? The moon's role in holding Earth steady also shaped the deep past of life itself. Imagine the first plants spreading onto land. They could grow because they could count on seasonal cycles, longer days in summer, shorter in winter. Animals that followed them learned to migrate, to hibernate, to breed in rhythm with the seasons. These patterns gave stability to ecosystems, allowing species to specialize and evolve in harmony with cycles that did not suddenly vanish. Without the moon, those rhythms would have been broken again and again, and life might never have reached the complexity we see today. Think of the ice caps. At today's tilt, they wax and wane gently with the seasons, melting slightly in summer, freezing in winter. But without the moon, when Earth tipped wildly, ice would melt completely in some eras, flooding continents, and then return in massive frozen sheets during others. Seas would rise hundreds of feet, drowning coastal plains, then fall away, leaving deserts behind. The coastline of Earth would never look the same for long. Imagine civilizations trying to build cities under such conditions. Any settlement near the ocean would be swallowed, abandoned, rebuilt, then abandoned again. Stability would be a dream, always just out of reach. Even animals as simple as insects and birds depend on tilt. Migration patterns follow the sun's path, which follows the tilt. Without stability, migration routes would break down. Species would collapse. Forests would vanish when pollinators could not survive. Oceans would suffer when fish migrations failed. The domino effect would reach everywhere, from plankton to predators, from grasses to grazing animals. The instability of tilt is not just an astronomical curiosity. It is a matter of survival for every form of life. And so we return to the moon, quiet and constant, circling above us. It looks still, but it is working every moment, pulling against Earth's bulge, holding us steady. That presence is the difference between chaos and rhythm, between unpredictable swings and gentle seasons. The moon has given Earth the chance to be a planet of balance, a place where life could flourish, where humans could build, where history could unfold under skies we could trust. Without it, Earth would have been a stranger to us, too unstable to call home. When we look at the moon, we often see only its light, its phases, its beauty in the sky. But what it truly gives us is invisible. It gives us stability. It gives us seasons. It gives us a climate we can count on. It is the silent hand on Earth's shoulder, steadying the spin, ensuring we do not fall into chaos. Without it, our planet would tilt and stagger, and the world we know would not exist. Chapter 4. A shorter day. Think for a moment about the way we measure our lives. We wake with the sun. We work through the hours of daylight. We rest when darkness falls. The rhythm of a 24-hour day is so natural that we rarely question it. But this rhythm was not always the same, and it is not something Earth created on its own. The moon has been slowly stretching our days longer with every century that passes. Without it, the Earth would still be spinning at the frantic pace it once did, and a day would be far shorter than the one we know. When Earth first formed, it spun much faster. A single rotation took no more than 6 hours. The sun would have risen and set 4 times in what we now call one day. The world then would have been a blur of light and darkness, cycles racing past before life even had time to notice. The young oceans would have heaved with storms driven by faster winds, and the surface would have been restless and harsh. Over billions of years, the moon's gravitational pull has acted as a brake, tugging on Earth and slowing its spin little by little. That is why we now have 24-hour days. It is why we know mornings, afternoons, and nights as distinct parts of life. Imagine Earth without this gentle braking. Our planet would still be spinning quickly, and our days might last only 6 or 8 hours. The sun would streak across the sky, never lingering long. Darkness would return before warmth had settled. Life would be forced to adapt to shorter rhythms. Plants would struggle to capture enough sunlight to grow. Animals would have to live in bursts of energy, hunting and feeding in rapid cycles. Sleep, as we know it, might not even exist. Rest would have to come in fragments, scattered across the racing hours. The consequences would ripple outward. Faster rotation would mean stronger winds, because the atmosphere would be pulled harder by the spinning surface. Storms would be more violent, weather systems more extreme. Oceans would churn, waves crashing with a force greater than what we know. The land would erode quickly, reshaped by relentless winds and rains. Life would exist, but it would be a life of constant struggle, shaped by an environment always moving too fast. Think about what this would mean for humans. If we had ever arisen in such a world, our sense of time would be entirely different. Instead of a long day in which to work, eat, and rest, we would live in fragments. Perhaps our species would evolve to be awake for a few hours, then sleep, then wake again, moving through several mini-days in what we now call one rotation. Civilization would be harder to build in this rhythm. Farming, for instance, depends on long stretches of daylight and predictable cycles. In a world of short days, crops would grow under weaker conditions. Seasons, already unstable without the moon's tilt control, would become even more chaotic when combined with days too short for balance. And yet, the slowing of Earth's rotation has given us more than just comfort. It has given us time itself. With longer days, life had the chance to evolve more complex rhythms. Plants learned to follow the sun's path, opening in the morning, closing at night. Animals learned to hunt by day or prowl by night. Humans eventually built their lives around hours, minutes, and seconds. The moon made this possible by dragging Earth's spin into a slower pace, turning chaos into order, turning a rushing blur into a livable cycle. Even now, the process continues. Earth's days are still lengthening, though so slowly we do not notice. Every century, the day grows by a fraction of a second. In hundreds of millions of years, the days will stretch longer than 24 hours, and all the while the moon will drift farther away, inch by inch, as it takes the energy of Earth's spin and carries it into space. It is a cosmic trade. Our world slows down, while the moon drifts outward, locked forever in a partnership that shapes both bodies. If the moon had never been there, none of this would have happened. The days would still be short, the winds still strong, the seas still violent. Perhaps life would have found a way to exist, but it would be a life unfamiliar to us, quick, restless, always adjusting to a world that never gave it time to breathe. The human story, if it ever unfolded, would be carved in fragments, never given the stability needed to build civilizations that last through centuries. So when we talk about the moon, we often think of light in the night sky, or the tides in the sea. But its influence reaches deeper. It has given us the very length of the day. It has slowed Earth enough for stability, for comfort, for life to evolve in complex patterns. It has given us mornings long enough to wake gently, afternoons long enough to work, nights long enough to dream. Without it, time itself would feel different. Life would be rushed, the world would be harsher, and Earth would spin endlessly fast, never pausing long enough for us to exist as we do now. The moon gave us days that we can live within. It gave us a rhythm that shapes every part of our lives. Without it, the Earth would still turn, but too quickly, too violently, too chaotically, and perhaps there would be no one here to watch the sun rise and fall at all. Chapter 5. Darkness at night. Look up at the night sky and imagine it without the moon. At first, you might not think much has changed. The stars are still there, thousands of them, scattered across the heavens. The Milky Way still cuts a faint path of light. Planets still shine, moving slowly across the darkness. But then it sinks in. The glow you have always known is missing. The sky is darker, sharper, lonelier, and on the ground where we live our lives, the world feels suddenly unfamiliar. A full moon is almost blinding in its brightness. It is nearly 500,000 times brighter than the brightest star in the night sky. Its glow is enough to cast shadows, to make paths visible, to illuminate forests and seas. Without it, nights would be black in a way we can barely imagine. The stars, as beautiful as they are, do not give enough light to navigate by. Without the moon, when the sun sets, true darkness would fall. The kind of darkness where your hand disappears inches in front of your face, where the horizon vanishes, where even the trees around you blend into shadow. For early humans, this difference would have been everything. Firelight would have been the only shield against that depth of night. Villages would have clustered tightly around flames, afraid to step beyond their glow. Travel would have been dangerous, maybe impossible, once the sun was gone. The moon gave our ancestors courage to leave the safety of the fire and move across landscapes under its silver glow. Hunters could stalk prey by its light, and families could gather under its brightness without fear. Remove it, and the world after sunset would feel hostile, unwelcoming, and closed. And then there is time. The moon has always been our clock in the sky. Its phases gave us months, cycles, and rituals. People watched it wax and wane, and in its pattern they found rhythm. Without it, time would have been harder to track. We would still have had the sun and the seasons, but months, the neat division of a year into smaller cycles, would never have existed. Our calendars would be different, our rituals fewer, our sense of time less detailed. Human culture itself would have unfolded in another way, shaped by the absence of this visible, reliable measure in the sky. The moon is not only for humans. Countless animals live by its light. Predators use it to hunt. Lions, wolves, and owls all rely on moonlight to see. Prey animals, in turn, use it to sense danger. Without the moon, the balance between hunter and hunted would change forever. Sea turtles hatch on beaches and crawl toward the brightest horizon, usually the moon's reflection on the ocean. Without that glow, hatchlings would wander inland, lost to predators or exhaustion. Birds migrating across continents look to the moon as a guide, using its position to orient themselves. Even insects respond to it, swarming in patterns tied to lunar light. Remove it, and whole ecosystems falter. Evolution itself would have followed another course, producing creatures adapted to a darker, harsher night. Now imagine the emotional side of such a world. For humans, the night has always been a place of mystery, sometimes fearful, sometimes inspiring. The moon softened that mystery. It gave us something to look at, something to trust. something that made the dark seem less infinite. Without it, fear might have shaped us more deeply. We might have become creatures of daylight only, retreating completely when the sun set. Perhaps our eyes would have evolved to see better in darkness, or perhaps our cultures would have relied far more on artificial light. But something would be missing. The shared experience of standing together under the moon, watching its phases, feeling connected to a sky that changed and responded to time. And then think of art, of poetry, of music. The moon has inspired humans since the beginning of language. Poets have written of it for thousands of years. Farmers planted by it. Lovers swore oaths beneath it. Children gazed at it and dreamed. Without it, our stories would be poorer. The night sky would still be vast and beautiful, but it would lack the symbol that unites people across all cultures. No moonlight to paint silver paths on the ocean. No crescent to mark the passing of time. No symbol of change, rebirth, or mystery to capture our imaginations. The difference is not just cultural. The absence of the moon would shape how societies evolved. Think of sailors. For thousands of years, they navigated by both stars and moonlight. A sky without the moon would have made exploration harder, riskier, slower. Some journeys might never have been attempted. Whole civilizations might have remained isolated, their coasts unvisited, their people untouched by others for centuries longer. Trade would have been delayed, ideas would have spread more slowly, and human history would have been rewritten. Even today, we still rely on the moon in ways we forget. Farmers in parts of the world still plant by lunar cycles. Pilots, sailors, and soldiers once trained to read it. Campers look to it to plan nights outdoors. Its light is woven into our sense of place and time, even now in the age of electricity. Without it, nights would be static, unchanging, without pattern. The moon waxing and waning reminds us that time is always moving, that nothing is permanent. Without that visible cycle, our relationship to time itself would feel different, less intimate, less grounded in the sky. A moonless night would be lonelier. Look up, and the stars are there. But they do not comfort in the same way. They are too far, too faint, too unchanging. The moon is close, bright, familiar. It feels like a companion, not a distant backdrop. Without it, the night sky becomes colder. It loses its anchor, its landmark, its most human face. The moon's light is not just a convenience. It is part of what makes Earth feel alive after sunset. It softens fear, it sparks imagination, it creates cycles for both nature and culture. Without it, the darkness would be overwhelming. The Earth would feel like a planet that turns its face away from the sun each night and falls into nothingness. The beauty of moonlight, the glow on water, the pale shimmer on snow, the silver halo around trees would never exist. Nights would be absolute, and our lives would be smaller, more confined, more cautious. So when you stand under a full moon, remember what it means. It is not only decoration in the sky, it is light that shaped our culture, our stories, our courage, and even our biology. It is the reason nights are luminous instead of black. It is the reason humans dared to explore after sunset. It is the reason we tell stories of cycles and rebirth. Without it, we would be different. The Earth itself would feel different, and perhaps, in a world without moonlight, we would have been too afraid of the dark to ever truly step forward into it. Chapter 6. Lost Cycles of Time. Close your eyes and imagine a world without the moon. Not just a darker night sky, but a life without the steady rhythm of waxing and waning phases, without crescents and full moons to mark the passing of weeks. Imagine living under a sky where the only clock above you is the sun, rising and setting, but nothing in between to divide the year into smaller pieces. That is what Earth would feel like without its lunar companion. A world without months, a world without the cycles that shaped human culture, ritual, and imagination. From the beginning of human history, the moon has been a calendar in the sky. Its phases gave ancient people a way to track time long before clocks or mathematics. The sliver of a new moon was a marker of beginning. The full moon was a sign of midpoint. The waning crescent meant a cycle was ending. Whole systems of farming, fishing, and travel grew out of this simple, reliable pattern. Without the moon, time would have been harder to measure. There would still be the sun, of course, and the turning of seasons, but the finer divisions of months and weeks would never have existed. The year would feel long, unbroken, harder to navigate. Think about what that would mean for culture. Festivals tied to full moons would never have been born. Stories about cycles of renewal and change might never have been told. Ancient farmers would have struggled to decide when to plant or harvest, lacking the lunar guide they once trusted. Civilizations would have developed calendars eventually, but they would be cruder, based only on the sun, with fewer markers to break the monotony of the year. Life would feel less patterned, less rhythmic, less connected to the sky above. And then there's myth. The moon has been one of humanity's greatest symbols. In every culture, it appears as a god, a goddess, a guide, a mirror of human emotion. Its phases reminded people that change is natural, that endings are always followed by beginnings. Without it, stories would have been different. We might still have looked up at the stars, but the sky would feel static. The sense of living in a universe that breathes with cycles would be weaker. Our imagination would have lost one of its most powerful anchors. The absence of the moon would change not just how we measured time, but how we felt time itself. When you watch the moon grow each night, you sense time moving in a way that the sun alone cannot provide. Days blur together, but the moon gives shape to weeks. It makes the invisible flow of time visible. Without it, time would feel less tangible. People might live more in the present, less connected to cycles, or perhaps they would create artificial cycles to replace what the moon once offered. But either way, something natural, something shared across all of humanity, would be missing. Even the idea of months, 12 divisions of the year, is rooted in the moon's cycle. Without it, our year might only be divided into seasons, or into arbitrary counts of days. Weeks, too, are tied indirectly to lunar phases. Imagine how different our calendars would be, how differently history would have been recorded if the moon had never been there to divide the sky into repeating segments. The very way we think of time as structured, with beginnings and endings, might have evolved differently. The moon also gave humans something to gather around. The full moon lit up the night so brightly that people could come together even after sunset. Festivals, hunts, rituals, all were timed to lunar light. Without it, communities might have remained more confined to daylight. Social life, exploration, and migration might have been slower, less adventurous. The courage to move into the night came partly from the moon's glow. Without it, the night would have been emptier. And so would human connection. Even in modern life, the moon still shapes us more than we notice. Fishermen follow lunar cycles because tides and catches change with it. Farmers still look to the moon in parts of the world. Religious and cultural calendars, from Ramadan to Easter to Lunar New Year, are built on its phases. Without it, these rituals would not exist. The shared human experience of looking up and knowing others were watching the same moon at the same time would vanish. It is not just a light in the sky, it is a bond. Imagine a civilization that never had this bond. Its people would still build culture, still tell stories, still live under stars, but their calendars would be more abstract, their rituals less tied to natural cycles. Their nights would be darker, their sense of connection to the cosmos weaker. They would see the sun dominate the sky, unopposed, unshared, without the softer balance of the moon. The pace of life itself might feel harsher, less rhythmic, less poetic. And so the absence of the moon is not just the absence of light, or tides, or stability. It is the absence of cycles, the invisible but vital rhythms that give shape to time and meaning to our lives. Without it, time would stretch endlessly, with no smaller divisions to guide us. Life would feel unmoored, disconnected from the sky. The moon's gift was not only stability for Earth's tilt, or tides for its oceans, but a shared rhythm for human history. It gave us a way to live not only in the moment, but in cycles, in stories, in rituals that reminded us we are part of something larger than ourselves. Chapter 7. Animal Rhythms. When you step outside at night, you are not alone in looking up at the moon. Countless creatures across Earth respond to its glow and its pull, weaving their survival into its rhythm. The moon does not just belong to us, to our calendars and myths. It belongs to the corals, the turtles, the fish, the birds, the wolves. It is their clock, their lantern, their signal. Without it, entire chains of life would unravel. Take coral reefs. These brilliant underwater cities are not just random bursts of color and life. They are synchronized wonders. Once a year at the full moon, corals release their eggs and sperm into the water all at once. The sea turns cloudy with the beginning of new life. It is a fragile, miraculous event, and it is guided by the moon. Remove that lunar cycle, and this synchronization would be lost. Corals would struggle to reproduce, reefs would decline, and the countless species that depend on them would collapse in turn. The moon is not decoration for these creatures. It is the heartbeat of their world. Think of sea turtles. On beaches under the glow of the moon, hatchlings break free from their eggs and scramble toward the brightest horizon. For millions of years, that brightness has been the reflection of moonlight on the sea. Without it, the tiny turtles would be lost, wandering inland, consumed by predators, never reaching the water. Whole generations would vanish. The moon is their compass, guiding them through the most vulnerable moment of their lives. Birds, too, are guided by the moon. Some use it as a map, fixing their journeys across continents by its steady path in the sky. Others time their migrations with lunar phases, setting off when the moon gives them enough light to travel at night. Without it, their ancient patterns would falter. The sky would still hold stars, but stars shift with the seasons. The moon is more immediate, more reliable. Its absence would mean confusion in the air, lost flocks, broken migrations. On land, predators and prey live by the moon's light. Wolves hunt more successfully under a full moon, their howls carrying across landscapes lit well enough to see. Owls swoop silently in moonlit fields, spotting small movements. At the same time, prey animals change their behavior to survive. Mice stay hidden on bright nights, knowing they are more visible. Deer move carefully, aware that predators have the advantage. Without the moon, this delicate balance would break. Nights would all be equally dark. Predators would lose one of their advantages. Prey would lose one of their signals. Evolution would shift in another direction entirely. Even the smallest creatures feel the moon. Insects swarm in patterns tied to its light. Fish spawn in cycles connected to lunar tides. Some species of worms emerge only during certain phases, timing their survival to the moon's pull on the sea. Remove it, and these cycles vanish. It is not just one animal or one ecosystem. It is countless species across every ocean and continent, each tuned to the same silent metronome in the sky. And what about humans? We too are animals shaped by rhythms. Our ancestors hunted more under bright moons. They gathered during full moons, traveled under its glow, told stories around fires with the moon overhead. Even today, some studies suggest that our sleep cycles shift slightly with lunar phases, that we are still in small ways connected to that light. Without it, our nights would be darker, our biology perhaps tuned differently. We might have evolved sharper night vision or stronger fear of the dark. Our history would look very different. The moon gave Earth more than tides and stability. It gave life a signal, a pattern, a guide. It stitched together the behaviors of species across the globe, creating a hidden harmony. Without it, that harmony would be broken. The ocean would lose its spawning rhythms. The land would lose its hunting signals. The sky would be emptier, offering no lantern to follow. Imagine Earth without this guidance. Coral reefs fade, turtle hatchlings vanish, birds scatter, predators hunt less successfully, prey lose their cues, insects swarm without order. Life would go on, but it would be rougher, thinner, less synchronized. The balance we know today would never have formed. The moon is the quiet conductor of an orchestra we rarely notice, and without it, the music of life would be disjointed, out of rhythm, and far less rich. So when you see the moon at night, know that it is more than a light for human eyes. It is a signal for reefs, a compass for turtles, a map for birds, a clock for insects, a hunting lamp for wolves. It is woven into the lives of creatures everywhere, and without it, Earth would not just be darker, it would be quieter, emptier, and far less alive. Chapter 8: Shaping Evolution. If you look at life on Earth, from the tiniest plankton drifting in the sea to the forests stretching across continents, you will find traces of the moon's influence everywhere. It is hidden in the timing of migrations, in the spawning of fish, in the growth of reefs, in the way ecosystems breathe with the tides. The moon has been part of evolution, not as a passive light in the sky, but as an active force shaping how life emerged, spread, and thrived. Without it, the history of life on Earth would be unrecognizable, perhaps even non-existent in the form we know today. Consider the earliest beginnings of life. Scientists believe that before life took hold in the oceans, it may have first sparked in tidal pools, shallow basins left behind when the sea retreated. These pools trapped organic molecules, concentrating them, exposing them to cycles of wet and dry, warm and cool. With every tide, new chemistry was stirred. Over countless cycles, these small experiments may have given rise to the first fragile forms of life. Without the moon, tides would have been far weaker, far less dramatic. The pools would not refill and empty with the same rhythm. The chemistry of life might never have reached the concentration it needed. Perhaps life would still have begun, but more slowly, less powerfully, or perhaps it would not have begun at all. Once life did emerge, the moon continued to shape it. The steady push and pull of tides acted as a pump for the oceans, mixing nutrients, oxygen, and heat. That movement kept ecosystems alive, preventing waters from stagnating. Without it, life might have remained simple, confined to microbial mats and bacteria, never reaching the complexity of plants and animals. The rise of multicellular life may have depended, in part, on the stirring hand of the moon. Think of the great migration of life from water to land. Plants began to creep onto shores, and animals followed. Their success depended on predictable cycles. Rain came and went, temperatures shifted with the seasons, tides rose and fell. Without the moon, those tides would have been faint, and Earth's tilt unstable, swinging between extremes. Shorelines would have been harsher, climates more chaotic, and the transition to land far riskier. The ancestors of amphibians might never have left the water. Forests might never have spread. The great experiment of life on land could have been delayed for millions of years, or perhaps never happened at all. Even after life established itself, the moon shaped its patterns. Corals, as we have seen, reproduce in synchrony with lunar cycles. Fish time their spawning to the tides. Birds and insects migrate with the moon as their guide. Evolution fine-tuned these species to follow lunar signals. Without them, life would have adapted differently. Maybe creatures would have evolved sharper reliance on the stars or more sensitivity to temperature. But the coordination, the shared global rhythm, would have been absent. The result would be ecosystems less synchronized, more scattered, less efficient in the great exchange of energy. The moon's role in stabilizing Earth's tilt was equally critical. Without it, the axis would wobble chaotically. Imagine evolution under such conditions. One epoch would freeze the poles into vast glaciers. Another would melt them into oceans. Forests would vanish. Deserts would spread. Ecosystems would collapse, then reform in new places. Life could adapt, but it would constantly be rebuilding, never given the chance to deepen into complexity. Species would be short-lived, ecosystems temporary. The slow, steady path of evolution that led to humans might never have had the stability it required. And what of humans themselves? Our evolution was shaped by climate, by the spread of savannas in Africa, by the reliability of seasons. Without the moon, those climates might have shifted too violently. Early humans might never have emerged from forests into grasslands. Our ancestors may have remained ape-like creatures, confined to shrinking habitats. The long chain of changes that produced intelligence, language, and civilization might never have been possible. Even if humans had emerged, our culture would look different. We would lack months, festivals, and rituals tied to the moon. Night travel and exploration would have been harder without its light. Myths and stories inspired by the moon would never have existed. Navigation across oceans would have been riskier. The spread of ideas, trade, and connection might have been slower. The very pace of human development would have been altered. Evolution is not just about survival of the fittest. It is about the shaping hand of environment, the cycles, the rhythms, the pressures that push species to change. The moon has been one of the greatest of these pressures. It shaped tides, climates, reproduction, migration, even time itself. It gave Earth a stability that allowed ecosystems to grow old, species to specialize, intelligence to emerge. Without it, Earth would still be a planet with oceans and land, with storms and sunlight, but it would not be the same planet. Its life would be simpler, its ecosystems less rich, its history less creative. So when we look up at the moon, we are not just looking at a companion in the sky, we are looking at a co-author of life's story. It wrote its influence into the chemistry of the first cells, into the migrations of animals, into the rhythms of forests and reefs. It steadied the planet, calmed its tilt, slowed its days, lit its nights, and gave life the time it needed to grow complex. Without it, evolution would be slower, harsher, perhaps too unstable to reach the point of consciousness. Without it, we might not be here at all, to wonder about what could have been. The moon is not simply orbiting Earth. It is written into every living thing that has ever existed here. It is in the corals spawning, the turtle's crawl, the bird's migration, the wolf's hunt, the human imagination. It is one of the reasons life flourished. Chapter 9. The Weather Machine. Close your eyes and picture the Earth turning. Right now it spins once every 24 hours, giving us mornings, afternoons, and nights. That cycle feels so natural that we never stop to wonder why it is this length, why the wind blows the way it does, why storms form in the patterns they do. But none of it is random. The length of our day, the way our atmosphere moves, even the balance of our climate have all been shaped by the moon. It is not simply a light in the night sky. It has acted for billions of years as a break on the Earth, slowing its rotation, calming its storms, making weather something life could adapt to. Without the moon, our planet would still be spinning too fast, and the atmosphere around us would be a raging, unstable machine. Billions of years ago, Earth's day was only 6 hours long. Imagine the sun rising and setting 4 times in what we now call a single day. Imagine shadows racing across the ground, winds tearing at the oceans, storms building and collapsing before creatures even had time to respond. A faster spin means stronger Coriolis forces, the invisible twist that deflects winds and currents into spirals. Even today, that force is what makes hurricanes curl into vast storms. If Earth rotated 3 or 4 times faster, every storm would be sharper, every wind stronger, every weather pattern more extreme. Without the moon to slow the planet down, the atmosphere would never have settled into the relatively calm system we live within. Think about what faster days would mean for heat. When Earth spins quickly, sunlight cannot warm the surface evenly. The ground heats and cools in quick bursts, never long enough to stabilize. The result is violent temperature contrasts. Air surges from hot zones to cold zones, building massive winds, Storm systems would form constantly, racing around the globe with relentless energy. Rain would fall in torrents, then vanish into drought. Agriculture would be impossible. Even forests and grasslands would struggle. Life could exist, but it would be life fighting against weather, not living comfortably within it. Now imagine adding another layer of chaos. Earth's tilt. The moon today keeps that tilt steady at 23.5 degrees. Without it, the axis would wobble chaotically, sometimes upright, with no seasons, sometimes tipped almost sideways, with one pole in constant sunlight, while the other froze in endless night. Combine this instability with a faster spin, and the climate becomes unrecognizable. Some eras would see continents drowned by rising seas as ice caps melted in the sun. Others would see vast frozen deserts when the poles turned away. Storms would rip across the planet with even greater force during these swings. Life would not simply adapt once. It would have to rebuild itself again and again, never given time to deepen into complexity. Consider the oceans. Today, tides stir them, mixing nutrients, oxygen, and heat. But the moon also affects how Earth's spin transfers energy into the seas. Without it, circulation would be different. The faster spin would whip surface waters violently, but the deep oceans would stagnate. Heat would not spread evenly. El Niño-like events, which today occur every few years, would become constant, destabilizing weather everywhere. Coastlines would flood with unpredictable storms. Rain belts would shift suddenly. Some places might drown in centuries of endless rainfall, while others baked in unrelenting drought. Weather like this does not only affect landscapes. It decides what creatures can live and where. Birds migrate on winds shaped by the Coriolis effect. Fish spawn in regions defined by ocean currents. Plants grow in climates where rainfall is stable. Without the moon's calming hand, these systems break down. A bird might migrate one century only to find its feeding grounds drown the next. A forest might flourish, then vanish under storms or droughts too severe to survive. Pollution would produce hardy, short-lived species, but the long, delicate chains of ecosystems we see today would never form. Now think of humans. Civilization grew because climate was gentle enough to trust. Farmers planted seeds in spring, harvested in summer, stored food for winter. The predictability of seasons allowed villages to grow into cities, cities into nations. Without the moon, that stability disappears. In one lifetime, a fertile valley could become a desert. In the next, it could drown under rising seas. Farming would collapse. Nomadic life might be the only option. Humans chasing survivable zones as weather changed too quickly for settlements to last. Civilization, if it ever arose, would be fragile, broken repeatedly by floods, storms, and climate swings no one could predict. Even today, with the moon, we see how sensitive our systems are. A single degree of warming shifts rainfall, strengthens hurricanes, pushes deserts outward. Climate change reminds us of how fragile balance can be. Now imagine multiplying that instability. Imagine a world where every century brings new extremes, not because of human influence, but because the planet itself is unstable. That is what Earth would be without the moon. But because the moon is there, Earth's spin slowed. The day stretched longer, winds weakened. The Coriolis effect eased into patterns that shaped trade winds, jet streams, monsoons, all the stable flows we depend on. Rain fell in predictable belts. Storms became less constant, more manageable. The axis stayed steady enough to give us regular seasons. The moon's work is invisible, but it has made weather something we can live within. It gave Earth not just tides and light, but a climate gentle enough for life to flourish. When you stand outside and feel the breeze, it is easy to think of it as ordinary. But that wind, that calm sky, that familiar cycle of seasons, all of it is part of a balance that exists only because the moon is there. Without it, Earth would be restless, storm-tossed, violent. Weather would rule every aspect of life. and civilizations like ours might never have existed. The moon is not just a distant rock, it is a regulator, a steadying hand on Earth's atmosphere. It slowed our spin, tamed our storms, and gave us skies that could be trusted. Without it, the Earth would still be a weather machine, but one running too hot, too fast, too unstable for us to survive within it. Chapter 10. The Polar Extremes. Imagine Earth leaning just a little more than it does now. Today, our axis tilts at about 23.5 degrees, and that angle is what gives us our familiar cycle of seasons. It is why the poles experience long winters and short summers, why the equator basks in steady heat, and why spring and autumn exist as transitions in between. But this balance is not locked in by Earth alone. The moon holds it steady. Without that steadying hand, the tilt of our planet would wander, drifting to extremes. Sometimes the planet would stand nearly upright, with no seasons at all. At other times, it would lean almost sideways, and the poles would face the sun directly for months or years. In those eras, the world would be unrecognizable. Picture Antarctica turned toward the sun. The ice sheet that now stretches across the southern pole would melt in blinding daylight. Oceans rising and flooding coastlines across the globe. Cities near the sea would vanish underwater. Forests would drown. Fields would become bays. Deserts would sink beneath shallow seas. Then, centuries later, the tilt would swing again. The same land that had been drenched in sun would tip into endless night, freezing once more, building ice sheets thicker than any we know today. The seas would retreat, leaving bare plains of salt and sand where oceans had once been. Coastlines would be drawn and redrawn not over millions of years, but in cycles so rapid that whole generations would see their world transform. This instability would not be gentle. It would ripple across every system of life. Plants depend on stable patterns of sunlight and temperature. With Earth tipping back and forth, forests would expand and vanish in repeating cycles. Jungles could thrive where deserts once lay, only to die back when ice returned. Grasslands might stretch over continents, then disappear under rising seas. Animals that depend on migration would find their routes broken. Birds flying north might find no summer waiting. Whales swimming to breeding grounds might find them frozen or drowned. Ecosystems would collapse, then rebuild, then collapse again. Evolution would not be a slow, steady story, but a series of frantic restarts. And what about humans? Agriculture, which depends on predictable seasons, would be nearly impossible in such a world. Farmers would not know when to plant, when to harvest, when the rains might come. A single generation might live in warmth and abundance, and the next might face ice and famine. Civilizations would rise and fall, not from war or politics, but from the tilt of the planet itself. People would be forced to move endlessly, chasing survivable climates, abandoning cities swallowed by seas or crushed by advancing glaciers. Permanent settlements might never last. Human history would be written in migrations, in survival against the chaos of shifting poles. Think about the atmosphere under these conditions, with ice melting and freezing unpredictably. Sea levels would rise and fall hundreds of feet. Ocean currents would stall or surge, carrying heat in wild, uneven ways. Some regions might scorch under dry skies, while others drowned in constant storms. The balance of winds and rainfall that we take for granted would be shattered. Monsoons, jet streams, and trade winds would vanish or reappear in different places. Weather would not just be unstable, it would be violent. The moon prevents this chaos by anchoring Earth's axis. Its pull keeps our tilt steady, allowing only a slow wobble of a few degrees over tens of thousands of years. That gentle shift gives us cycles like ice ages, but nothing more extreme. It is this steadiness that allowed agriculture to develop, migration to stabilize, civilizations to thrive. It gave humans confidence that the sun would return in spring, that winter would always give way to summer, that seas would not rise and fall so wildly that entire cultures were erased overnight. The moon gave us not just tides and light, but a climate that could be trusted. Even the rhythms of human culture depend on it. Festivals tied to harvests, calendars built on seasons, stories of winter's death and spring's rebirth. All are possible only because the tilt has remained steady. Without the moon, these cycles would break. Some generations might never know spring or autumn at all, living instead in endless summer or endless night. Others might watch their world swing back to balance, only to see it tilt again centuries later. Human imagination itself would be different, shaped by a sky and climate that never repeated, never offered reassurance. And life beyond humans would change too. Polar bears, penguins, seals, and countless birds and fish rely on stable ice for breeding and feeding. Without it, their populations would collapse. Tropics would shift, deserts would move, ecosystems would scatter. Life would adapt, but it would be simpler, less diverse, more temporary. Complex webs of interaction would give way to short-lived chains, forever rebuilding after the last collapse. The richness of Earth as we know it, forests, reefs, savannas, tundras, might never have formed. So when you look at the moon pale and quiet above, it is easy to think of it as distant decoration. But in truth, it is the reason we have gentle seasons, the reason spring follows winter, the reason civilizations can plan for the future. Without it, Earth would be a planet of extremes. Ice caps would melt and freeze unpredictably. Seas would rise and fall in devastating cycles. Forests would grow and vanish. Civilizations would scatter. Life would be less stable, less rich, less secure. The moon is not only a light at night, it is the hand that steadies Earth as it spins, preventing our axis from lurching wildly. It is the anchor that keeps our climate livable. Without it, Earth would tilt too far, too often, and the poles would swing between fire and ice. The balance we take for granted, the balance that allowed us to grow, to thrive, to imagine, would be gone. And Earth, without that balance, would be a far harsher home. Chapter 11. A planet of chaos. Look at Earth as it spins in space. To us, it feels like a planet of balance. The sun rises and sets. The seasons follow one another. The oceans rise and fall in their rhythms. And life has found a way to weave itself into these steady patterns. But all of that steadiness is fragile. It exists because the moon has been there, pulling, slowing, stabilizing. Take it away, and Earth would reveal another face, one far more unstable, far less forgiving. It would become a planet of chaos. Without the moon to hold our axis steady, the tilt of Earth would wander unpredictably. Today, our tilt stays close to 23.5 degrees, shifting only slightly over tens of thousands of years. That small wobble gives us ice ages and interglacial periods. But life and civilization can adapt. Without the moon, though, the tilt would swing wildly. Sometimes Earth would stand nearly upright, giving us no seasons at all, leaving the equator in constant heat and the poles locked in eternal cold. At other times, the planet might tip sideways, plunging one hemisphere into endless sunlight for months or years, while the other froze in darkness. These shifts would not be gentle. They would be catastrophic swings that remade the climate again and again. Imagine living in such a world. A single lifetime could see forests grow into abundance, only to wither when the climate lurched into drought. Cities might rise along coasts in times of stability, only to be drowned as seas surged hundreds of feet higher when ice caps collapsed. Deserts might vanish when rains returned, only to reappear centuries later. There would be no stability, no climate long enough for civilizations to trust, no ground firm enough to plan far into the future. History would not be a story of steady progress, but of repeated collapse. Even oceans would be reshaped by this chaos. Without the moon's strong tides, their circulation would weaken, nutrients would sink, oxygen would vanish from deep waters, and marine ecosystems would falter. Yet at the same time, Earth's faster spin, unchecked by lunar drag, would whip winds into stronger storms, stirring the seas with violence rather than rhythm. Hurricanes would strike with unpredictable frequency and force. Monsoons would wander from their paths. Rainfall would come in violent floods one century and vanish the next. Oceans would expand and contract as ice caps melted and refroze, erasing coastlines again and again. Life could adapt to some of these changes. Life always does, but it would be a harsher, simpler life, forced to evolve rapidly and repeatedly, never allowed to deepen into complex, stable ecosystems. Coral reefs, jungles, and savannas would not last for millions of years as they have in our world. They would come and go in fragile bursts, destroyed by sudden tilts and returning only when conditions allowed. Evolution would favor species that lived quickly, reproduced rapidly, and moved easily. Long-lived, specialized creatures like whales, elephants, or redwoods might never have evolved. And what about humans? Could we have emerged in such a place? Our story depends on stability. Agriculture began because seasons were reliable. People could plant in spring, harvest in summer, and prepare for winter knowing the cycle would repeat. In a moonless world, that trust would not exist. Farmers might sow seeds only to see their crops destroyed by sudden frost or endless drought. Nomadic survival would replace settled civilization. People would move constantly, chasing survivable climates, never building cities that could last. Villages would rise and vanish with the shifting tilt, leaving little behind but ruins swallowed by seas or buried beneath ice. Civilizations, if they managed to form, would be fragile. They would be destroyed not only by war or disease, but by the planet itself. Imagine a city flourishing on a coastline, its people thriving in fertile valleys. Then, within a few generations, the sea rises as polar ice melts, drowning the fields, swallowing the city. Survivors flee inland, only to face storms, drought, or ice, returning centuries later. Such stories would repeat endlessly. Human history would not be a march toward complexity, but a cycle of survival and collapse, and culture itself would reflect that chaos. Our myths today are filled with the cycles of the moon, the reassurance that time flows in patterns, that endings are followed by beginnings. Without the moon, myths might instead speak of instability, of a universe that cannot be trusted, of gods who tilt the world at will. Imagination would grow under skies that offered no comfort, only change and uncertainty. Humanity's sense of time and permanence would be different, shaped by a planet that erased its own history again and again. Even our relationship to the night sky would be altered. The moon gives us not only light, but also a sense of constancy. Its phases repeat, reassuring us that cycles endure. Remove it, and the night becomes darker, colder, lonelier. Stars shine, but they are too distant to change. They offer beauty, but not rhythm. Without the moon, the sky would not be a clock, but a void, silent, while the earth below spun into chaos. So much of what we take for granted is tied to this steadiness. Stable climates, lasting ecosystems, agriculture, civilization, even imagination, all depend on a world that does not tilt too far, too fast. Without the moon, Earth would never have given us that world. It would have been a place of extremes, where seas and skies destroyed as quickly as they created, where life lived in bursts but never built lasting harmony. The moon is not simply a satellite circling above. It is the anchor that kept Earth from becoming a planet of chaos. It steadied our tilt, stretched our days, calmed our storms, and gave us time to build, time to imagine, time to become who we are. Remove it, and Earth is transformed. Still beautiful, still alive, but wild, unstable, and hostile to the long story of civilization. It would be a planet in constant upheaval, a place where chaos ruled, and where we might never have existed at all. Chapter 12, A Different Human Story. When we talk about the moon, we often think of it as something separate from us, a companion in the sky, distant and beautiful. But if you take it away, it becomes clear that the moon is not just decoration, It is woven into our story. It shaped how we traveled, how we measured time, how we built culture, and even how we saw ourselves. Without it, humanity's journey would not just have looked a little different. It would have been another story entirely. Think first of the very earliest people. Imagine small bands of hunter-gatherers moving across the land at night. The moon, full and glowing, gave them light to see. It shone across rivers, turned leaves into silver shapes, and marked safe paths through forests and deserts. When the moon was gone, fire had to be their only defense, their only way to push back the dark. Without the moon, the night would have been absolute blackness. The stars are beautiful, yes, but they do not light the ground. Without lunar glow, people might have been far less willing to step into the night. Entire migrations could have slowed. Humans may have clung more tightly to daylight, afraid to venture far once the sun disappeared. The world would have felt smaller, harsher, more dangerous. Now think about time. The moon gave us months, long before we invented clocks, long before sundials or calendars. People looked up and saw the moon growing and shrinking, returning to the same shape again and again. The crescent meant beginning. The full moon meant midpoint. The waning crescent meant an ending. Without that cycle, time would have been harder to measure. We would still have had the sun, of course, and the changing of the seasons, but the finer rhythm of months would never have existed. The year would feel like one long, unbroken thread. Agriculture may have been delayed because early farmers would lack the lunar signal to tell them when to plant, when to harvest. Our sense of time, divided, patterned, rhythmic, would be rougher, less precise, less poetic. The absence of the moon would also leave a void in culture. Across every civilization, the moon has been central to myth and ritual. Temples were aligned to its rising. Myths described it as gods, goddesses, and spirits. Festivals celebrated its phases. Remove it, and our stories would be emptier. We might still have looked up at the stars, but they are distant, cold, unchanging. They inspire awe, but not intimacy. The moon is close, familiar, and always returning. Without it, the night sky would feel like a void, rather than a partner. Human imagination would have been robbed of one of its most universal symbols. Even our sleep might have been different. Some scientists suggest that humans still respond, in small ways, to lunar cycles, sleeping less during full moons. For thousands of generations, people hunted or gathered under lunar light, then retreated when it was gone. A moonless world might have shaped us differently. Perhaps our eyes would have evolved sharper night vision, or perhaps we would have been even more dependent on fire and artificial light. Our rhythms of rest and activity, our very biology, would carry the mark of that difference. Navigation, too, would have changed. The moon lit oceans for sailors. It helped them read tides. It gave them another point of reference in the sky. Without it, journeys across seas would have been far riskier. Whole civilizations might have remained isolated for centuries longer, cut off from trade, from the spread of ideas, from the blending of cultures. The world might have stayed fragmented, each region locked in its own story, unaware of others. The moon was not just a light, it was a bridge between peoples. Even everyday life would have felt smaller. The moon gave people confidence. Villages could gather safely under its glow. Hunters could stalk prey. Families could tell stories by firelight, with a pale companion overhead. Without it, the night would have been lonelier. People would have retreated more quickly indoors. Festivals would have been rarer. Songs and stories would have reflected not the beauty of silver light, but the endless weight of darkness. Humanity might have grown more cautious, less curious, less adventurous. Our boldness was in part nurtured by knowing the night was not always black, that there was a lantern above. And what about writing, art, poetry? From the beginning, the moon has been our muse. It has been painted, sung, worshipped, feared, and adored. It is a symbol of longing, of change, of return. Without it, human creativity would be poorer. The stories we tell would lack one of their greatest images. Lovers would not swear oaths beneath it. Poets would not write of it. myths of cycles and rebirth would never have been born. Imagine literature without the moon. Imagine music without its metaphors. Imagine art without its pale glow. The imagination of humanity would have been smaller, darker, less universal. Even religion would be different. Entire calendars, Islamic, Jewish, Hindu, Chinese, are built on lunar cycles. Rituals are tied to its phases. Without the moon, these patterns would never have existed. Religion would still have grown, but it would have been shaped by other rhythms, more solar, less cyclical. We would lose a shared bond that unites billions of people even now. The sight of the same moon, rising above different lands, watched by different eyes but seen as one. Without it, humanity's spiritual imagination would be narrower. And then think of exploration. The moon was our first step into space. It was close enough to dream of, close enough to reach. Without it, space exploration might have been delayed by centuries. Humanity would have had no nearby goal, no first leap beyond Earth. The Apollo missions, the photographs of Earth from lunar orbit, the first footprints in dust, none of it would exist. Our sense of belonging to a universe beyond Earth might still be in its infancy. The moon was more than a light. It was a ladder. Without it, we might never have climbed. So much of what makes us human, our migrations, our calendars, our myths, our courage, our art, our exploration, has been tied to the moon. Without it, the human story would be less adventurous, less connected, less inspired. We might still exist, yes, but we would be a different species telling different stories, moving more cautiously, dreaming less boldly. Humanity as we know, it would not have been the same. And so when you stand outside and see the moon glowing softly above, remember what it means. It is not just scenery, it is part of your history, part of your imagination, part of your very sense of time. It gave us light when we feared the dark, rhythm, when we needed patterns, courage, when we sought adventure, and wonder when we looked for meaning. Without it, our story would be smaller. With it, we became who we are. Humanity's tale is not just written on Earth, it is written in the light of the moon. Chapter 13. The fragile balance. We live inside a balance so steady that we rarely notice it. The sun rises and sets. Days stretch long enough to live within. The seasons follow one another in a pattern we can trust. The oceans breathe in and out with tides. It feels permanent, as if Earth has always been this way. But this balance is fragile. It exists only because the moon has been circling us for billions of years, pulling, slowing, stabilizing. Remove the moon and the world that feels familiar would quickly dissolve into something unrecognizable. Earth would not stop being beautiful. The skies would still shine, the seas would still glitter, but it would be a beauty bound to chaos, not to balance. The most profound change would begin with Earth's tilt. Right now, our axis leans at about 23.5 degrees. That angle gives us seasons. It is why summers are warm, winters cold, why plants bloom in spring, why animals migrate. But the angle is not naturally stable. The pull of other planets, the internal churning of Earth itself, would push the tilt to swing chaotically. It is the moon that steadies it. Without the moon's gravity to hold us in place, the axis would wander. Sometimes Earth would stand upright, with no tilt at all. There would be no seasons, just permanent heat at the equator and permanent ice at the poles. At other times, the tilt would swing wildly, perhaps to 40, 60, even 80 degrees. Then one pole would face the sun in endless daylight, melting ice and flooding coasts, while the other pole sank into endless night, frozen in darkness. The instability would not be rare. It would define Earth's character. Think of what this would mean for climate. In our world, civilizations rose because seasons were predictable. People could plant seeds in spring, harvest in summer, and prepare for winter. Animals could migrate, forests could grow, oceans could sustain cycles of plankton and fish. Without the moon, this predictability would collapse. One generation might live through mild seasons, and the next might face catastrophic swings. Crops would fail, grasslands would wither, seas would surge into cities, and then retreat, leaving salt flats behind. Climate would not be a background to human history. It would be the main force rewriting it, over and over. The moon also gave us time. When Earth first formed, days were only 6 hours long. The sun would have raced across the sky 4 times in what we now call one day. Winds would have been stronger, storms sharper, oceans more violent. But the moon's pull slowed our spin. Over billions of years, it stretched our days into 24 hours, creating the rhythm we now live by. Without that drag, our planet would still spin quickly. Our days would last only a few hours, winds tearing at the surface, weather erupting with terrifying speed. It is hard to imagine agriculture, settlement, or even human sleep under such conditions. Life might still exist, but it would be fast, restless, fragmented. Stability and daily rhythm, mornings, afternoons, nights, is not guaranteed by Earth. It is a gift of the moon. And then there are the oceans. The tides are not just scenery, they are engines of life. When the moon pulls the sea outward, it exposes tidal pools where molecules once concentrated to form the chemistry of life. When the water returns, it stirs nutrients and oxygen, feeding plankton, which feed fish, which feed the rest of the ocean's food chain. Without the moon, tides would shrink to 1/3 of their strength, driven only by the sun. The seas would fall silent, estuaries would stagnate, reefs would weaken, coastal life would falter. Entire ecosystems built on tidal rhythms would collapse. Even the spark of life itself may have been delayed, for those shallow pools might never have existed in the same way. Imagine humanity without tides. Fishermen through history would have lacked one of their most reliable guides. Sailors would have found navigation harder, their journeys slower, their confidence weaker. Many coastal cultures grew from knowledge of the sea's breathing. Without it, trade and migration would have been delayed, exploration less bold. Whole chapters of human history, the spread of cultures across oceans, the discovery of new lands, the mingling of ideas, would have unfolded differently. And then there is the light. The moon gave us nights that were not absolute black. Our ancestors followed its glow across landscapes. Hunters stalked prey by it. Villages gathered safely under it. Without the moon, fire would have been our only tool against the dark. People may have been more hesitant, less adventurous, slower to migrate. Even our myths would have been darker, missing one of their most universal images. Think of how much poetry, art, and ritual is tied to the moon. Remove it, and human imagination would be poorer, our sense of connection to the sky weaker. All of this points to one truth. The moon gave us balance. It steadied the tilt, slowed the spin, lit the night, stirred the seas, inspired imagination. Without it, Earth would be unstable, stormy, dark, and poor in life. Civilizations might have risen, but they would have fallen again and again under seas that surged unpredictably, climates that swung without warning, skies that gave no rhythm. Humanity might never have reached the point of permanence. History would be fragmented, survival a constant struggle. It is easy to take balance for granted. We live inside it so completely that it feels natural, but it is fragile, and it was never guaranteed. The moon is the anchor that kept Earth from drifting into chaos. It gave us seasons that repeat, days long enough to rest, oceans that breathe, nights that shine, myths that inspire. Without it, Earth would be a world of chaos, not of balance. So when we look up and see the moon pale and constant, we are seeing more than a satellite. We are seeing the partner that made Earth home. It is not just circling us, it is holding us steady. The fragile balance we call life on Earth was shaped from the beginning by the moon. Chapter 14, The Ocean Without Breath. Stand on a beach and watch the tide. You may not always think of it, but what you are seeing is Earth's lungs. The water pulls back, revealing sand and shells, then returns with a rush, carrying with it oxygen, nutrients, and life. This steady in and out is not only scenery, it is the ocean breathing, and it breathes because the moon pulls on it. Without the moon, that breath would weaken, almost stop, and the seas would become quiet in ways that are hard to imagine. The tides are not just waves. Waves are caused by wind pushing across the surface. Tides are deeper, slower, more powerful. They are the result of the moon's gravity stretching the oceans. As Earth spins, that pull moves across the planet, creating a cycle of rising and falling water. It is so predictable that sailors and fishermen have trusted it for thousands of years. It is so powerful that it moves not just shorelines but entire ecosystems. Without the moon, that pull would shrink to a third of its strength. Driven only by the sun, the tides would still exist, but they would be faint, like a whisper compared to a voice. Now think of what weaker tides would mean for life. Along the coastlines, tidal zones are among the richest habitats on Earth. Crabs scuttle across sand when the tide recedes. Mussels and barnacles cling to rocks, waiting for the water to return. Shorebirds hunt in the shallows. All of these rhythms depend on tides moving with strength and regularity. Without the moon, these zones would shrink. The line between land and sea would be more permanent, less dynamic. Species adapted to cycles of wet and dry would struggle. The drama of survival along the shore would fade. Coral reefs too would suffer. They rely on tidal movement to bring nutrients, to flush waste, to feed the polyps that build their skeletons. With weaker tides, that mixing slows. Nutrients sink and stay trapped below, unreachable. Reefs grow more fragile, fish scatter. The brilliant colors fade into silence. Estuaries, where rivers meet the sea, would change as well. These places are nurseries for countless fish, sustained by the flushing of tides. Without them, estuaries would stagnate, young fish would die, food chains would collapse, and coasts would grow empty. Even the open ocean would feel the loss. Tides do not just shape coasts, they help circulate oxygen throughout the sea. When the water moves, it mixes layers, carrying oxygen downward and nutrients upward. Without that motion, the deep ocean begins to suffocate. Zones without oxygen spread wider. Whole regions of the sea turn barren, unable to support life. The surface may still sparkle with sunlight, but beneath, the water grows still and lifeless. And think of history. For humans, tides have always been guides. Fishermen launched their boats by them. Traders watched them to know when to sail. Farmers near coasts planned their days with them. Ancient sailors read them as part of the code of navigation, trusting the moon as much as the wind. Without strong tides, this code would have been weaker, harder to trust. Travel may have been delayed, migration slower, exploration more dangerous. Our relationship with the sea would have been cautious, not confident. It is possible that life itself began in tidal pools, those shallow basins left behind when water retreated. There molecules gathered, concentrated, and reacted. Each cycle gave chemistry another chance to combine until biology emerged. Without tides, these pools might never have formed. Life could have started elsewhere, yes, but perhaps later, slower, or in simpler forms. The moon may have been part of the very spark of life, and what of culture? The moon's pull on the sea shaped not only biology but imagination. Ancient people saw the tides and connected them to the moon, weaving myths of gods pulling at the waters, spirits dancing in the waves. Stories grew from that connection. Stories that gave meaning to cycles of change. Without it, the sea would seem more static. The link between the sky above and the water below would be invisible. Our myths would be poorer, our imagination narrower. Even now, the sound of the sea is part of us. Beaches roar with waves, yes, but much of their voice comes from the energy of tides amplifying movement. Without them, coasts would be quieter. Stand on such a beach in your mind, the water lapping gently, never pulling back far, never surging forward with power. It would seem calm, but the calm would be lifeless, like a breath held too long. The ocean would look the same, but it would not feel alive. Without the moon, Earth's seas would be vast but shallow in spirit. They would still cover most of the planet, still reflect sunlight, still crash in storms. But the everyday pulse, the in-and-out rhythm that feeds life, would be missing. The ocean would be less fertile, less diverse, less alive. Humanity would inherit a quieter, poorer sea, and perhaps a quieter, poorer world. So when you listen to the tide, know what you are hearing. It is not only water moving, it is gravity stretched across space. It is the moon pulling at Earth, stirring it, keeping the seas alive. Remove that pull, and the ocean would lose its breath. And without living oceans, Earth would lose its balance, its abundance, its soul. Chapter 15. The Sky Without a Guide. And there, dominating it all, is the moon. Bright, familiar, close enough to feel like a companion. But imagine the sky without it. A black dome filled only with distant stars. Beautiful but cold, unchanging, remote. Without the moon, the sky would lose its anchor. It would lose its guide. And humanity, for much of its history, would have been left adrift in darkness. For ancient people, the moon was more than scenery. It was the lantern of the night, casting shadows on the ground, silvering the edges of trees, reflecting in rivers and seas. It gave enough light for hunters to track game, for travelers to walk paths, for villages to gather together in safety. Without it, the night would have been absolute blackness. Fire would have been the only light, and beyond its glow would lie danger. Predators moving unseen, paths disappearing into shadow, rivers impossible to cross. Without the moon, early humans might have stayed closer to camp, more fearful of the dark, less willing to explore. Migration could have slowed, curiosity might have been blunted by caution. The world would have felt smaller. The moon also served as a compass. Its phases marked time. Its rising and setting told direction. Its connection to the tides revealed the link between sky and sea. Ancient sailors used it not just for light, but as part of the map of the heavens. They navigated by stars, yes, but the moon gave context, gave rhythm, gave reassurance that the sky could be read. Without it, navigation would have been harder. Journeys across seas would have been delayed. Trade routes would have formed more slowly. Civilizations might have remained isolated, their stories unfolding in separate worlds for centuries longer. And then there is imagination. The moon has been central to myth across every culture. It is a goddess, a god, a spirit, a mirror of human emotion. It has been a symbol of rebirth as it waxes and wanes, a reminder that endings are followed by beginnings. Without it, our stories would have been different. We might still have filled the sky with gods, but we would have lost one of the most universal images of change in return. The sky would feel colder, less human, more distant. The shared experience of looking at the same moon from different lands, different languages, would not exist. We would lose one of our greatest cultural bonds. The moon also gave us courage. Nights under its glow were less terrifying. It softened fear and inspired wonder. Festivals were held during full moons, journeys planned by its light, rituals timed to its phases. Without it, nights would have been emptier. Human culture would be shaped by fire and darkness, not by the silver balance of the moon. We might have been a species more cautious, more inward, slower to build confidence in the vastness of the world. Even now, the moon is more than light. It is a teacher. It showed us that the heavens move in cycles, that time has patterns. It taught us to count months, to track seasons, to measure life in rhythms. Without it, we might still have learned these things from the sun and stars, but later, slower, less precisely. The moon made time visible, tangible, intimate. Its absence would have left humanity with a sky more difficult to read, a universe harder to understand. And what of exploration? The moon was our first step beyond Earth. It was near enough to dream of, near enough to reach. Apollo was not just about technology. It was about imagination, about seeing Earth from afar for the first time, about understanding our place in the cosmos. Without the moon, that dream would have been farther away, perhaps centuries farther. Space would have felt less accessible. Humanity might never have seen its planet as a fragile sphere against the vastness of the void, at least, not yet. The moon was our ladder to the stars. Without it, our climb would have been delayed. Now picture a world where the moon has never existed. Nights are always black, villages huddled tighter around flames, migration slower, calendars cruder, myths poorer. Sailors hesitate to cross oceans. Civilizations stay isolated. Imagination grows narrower. Humanity still exists, yes, but it is less adventurous, less connected, less inspired. The sky above without the moon would be beautiful but indifferent. It would not call to us in the same way. It would not feel like a guide. The truth is, the moon has always been more than rock. It has been a presence, a teacher, a companion, a mirror. It steadied our world, but it also steadied us. It gave us courage to move through darkness, curiosity to mark time, imagination to tell stories, and ambition to reach beyond Earth. Without it, the human journey would have been smaller. With it, we became a species that not only survived the night, but learned to dream under it. So when you look up tonight, see the moon not as a distant object, but as a guide that has shaped every step of the human story. The sky without it would have been emptier, darker, colder. With it, the sky became a map, a clock, a poem, and a dream. The moon gave us a guide, and through it, we found ourselves. Chapter 16. The final goodbye. Stand for a moment, and imagine the moon fading away. Not ripped suddenly from the sky, but drifting farther and farther until it is gone, leaving Earth alone. At first, the loss would be strange, but survivable. A darker night sky, weaker tides, a wobble so slight that only astronomers might notice. But as centuries and millennia passed, the absence would deepen. Earth would lose its balance, and life, little by little, would be reshaped by chaos. The moon has been with us since the beginning. To lose it would not just change the sky, it would change the very identity of Earth. The first difference would be felt in the oceans. Tides, once strong and steady, would weaken to a faint ripple driven only by the sun. Beaches would no longer shift between wet and dry. Tidal pools would vanish. Estuaries would stagnate. Whole ecosystems would collapse. The reefs, dependent on tidal flushing, would wither. Shorebirds, crabs, and countless species tied to intertidal zones would vanish. Even the open sea would begin to suffocate, its circulation weaker, its oxygen dwindling. The ocean, once alive with movement, would grow quieter, flatter, emptier. Without tides, Earth would lose its pulse. The next difference would come in the skies. Our day would shorten as Earth's rotation, no longer slowed by the moon, gradually sped up. Mornings, afternoons, nights, all would shrink. Winds would grow stronger, storms more violent, weather more chaotic. The rhythm of 24 hours, so deeply written into our biology, would begin to fray. Sleep cycles would break. Plants would struggle to adapt to shorter days. Animals would move differently, hunt differently, live differently. Humanity would feel the change, not only in weather, but in the exhaustion of living within a rhythm too fast to rest. Then the seasons would begin to fail. The tilt of Earth's axis, no longer steadied by lunar gravity, would wander. For centuries, it might stand nearly upright, giving us no seasons at all. Eternal heat at the equator, eternal cold at the poles. Then, over millennia, it would tip to extremes, perhaps to 60 or 70 degrees. One pole would face the sun in endless light, ice caps melting, seas rising, coasts drowning. The other would freeze in endless night, forests collapsing, deserts spreading. Then the cycle would reverse, swinging back and forth in violent rhythm. Civilizations would rise and fall, not from war or ambition, but from the planet itself. Balance would be gone. For humanity, the loss would be cultural, as well as physical. Nights would be darker than any our ancestors ever knew. Fire and electricity might fill the gap, but the moon's presence as a companion, as a universal symbol, would be missing. No more myths of gods and goddesses walking across the sky. No more poems of longing tied to the crescent. No more festivals marked by full moons. The calendar would lose its months. Time itself would feel less cyclical, less connected to the sky. The bond humanity once felt with the heavens would weaken. The stars are too far, too unchanging, to replace what the moon gave us. Exploration would also be different. The moon was our first step into space, the place where we proved we could leave Earth. Without it, humanity might have hesitated longer, perhaps centuries longer, before reaching beyond the atmosphere. We would not have seen the famous image of Earth rising above the lunar horizon, a fragile blue sphere against the black of space. We would not have felt the unity of knowing that everyone, everywhere, lives on that small ball of light. The moon gave us perspective, and without it, we would be slower to understand our place in the cosmos. Even evolution itself would be changed. Life might still exist, but it would be simpler, more fragile, less diverse. Without tidal pools, perhaps life would have started later or in another form entirely. Without strong tides, the oceans would have been poorer, ecosystems less rich. Without a stable tilt, climates would have swung too violently for complex species to thrive. Without steady days, biology would have been shaped differently. Intelligence might never have emerged. Humanity itself might never have appeared. The moon is not just part of our story. It may be the reason there is a story at all. So the final goodbye would not only be the loss of a glowing circle in the sky, it would be the unraveling of everything the moon has given us. Steady tides, gentle seasons, balanced climates, a rhythm of time, myths and stories, courage in the dark, and the dream of leaving Earth. Its absence would echo through biology, culture, history, and imagination. Earth would survive. Yes, life would endure in some form. But it would not be the Earth we know. It would not be the home that nurtured us. When you look at the moon, you are looking at more than light. You are looking at the quiet force that steadied Earth, the companion that gave us balance, the mirror that reflected our imagination back at us. Without it, Earth would be darker, poorer, lonelier. With it, we have seas that breathe, skies that guide, cultures that dream, and a history rich enough to wonder about what might have been. The moon has been with us since the beginning. It shaped our oceans, our days, our seasons, our myths, our journeys, our very existence. To imagine Earth without it is to imagine a different planet, a different life, a different humanity. But because it is here, circling above, silent but constant, we are here too, balanced, thriving, and able to ask the question, what would happen if it were gone? The answer is simple: everything.